My brother called it a game. He stood in the parking lot of a Walmart in Tulsa, Oklahoma, crossed his arms, and smiled at me like he'd just said something clever. "Consider it a life lesson," he said. "Let's see if Little Miss Perfect can find her own way home." Then he got in the car, and he drove away. I was 17 years old. I had $11 in my pocket, no phone. He'd taken it from me 20 minutes earlier to hold on to it, and I was 430 miles from home. The whole thing started because I'd asked him to stop at a gas station so I could use the bathroom. That's it. That's the whole reason. We were driving back from our grandmother's funeral in Missouri, just the two of us, because our parents had flown home early and he'd volunteered to drive me back. I said I needed a bathroom break. He said we weren't stopping. I said please. He pulled into the Walmart, told me to make it quick, and by the time I came out, his car was gone. At first I thought he was joking. I stood on the curb in the August heat and waited for him to circle back around. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5. He didn't come back. Before I tell you what I did next and how the night actually ended, tell me, what time is it where you are right now? Drop it in the comments. I want to know who's up watching this with me. I walked back into the Walmart because I didn't know what else to do. I was 17, I was alone, and my hands were shaking. I went to the customer service desk and I told the woman there what had happened. I said my brother had left me. I said I needed help. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she picked up the phone and called a manager. His name was Gerald. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with a Walmart vest and a name tag and the kind of tired eyes that have seen a lot of things and a lot of years. He brought me to a little back office and sat across from me and said, "Tell me exactly what happened." I told him. All of it. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished, he pushed a box of tissues across the desk toward me. I hadn't even realized I'd started crying. He let me use the store phone to call home. My mother answered on the second ring. I told her what my brother had done. There was a pause on the other end of the line that lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, "You probably said something to upset him." I was so stunned I couldn't speak for a second. I said, "Mom, he left me in Tulsa. I'm in a Walmart. I'm alone." She said, "He's a good driver. He'll figure it out. Just wait there and stop being dramatic." Then she hung up. Gerald watched my face while I held the receiver, and I think he understood immediately what had just happened because he said, "Is someone coming to get you?" And I said quietly, "I don't think so." And he pulled his chair a little closer and said, "All right, then here's what we're going to do." He called the Tulsa Police Department from that same phone. He explained the situation. An officer came to the store within 40 minutes. A woman named Officer Reyes, calm and professional, with a notepad and a no-nonsense manner that somehow made me feel safer than I'd felt all evening. She took my statement. She asked for my brother's name, his license plate, the make and model of his car. Then she picked up her radio and read the description out loud. I heard the words juvenile abandonment, and something cold and solid settled into my chest. That's what this was. That's what he had done. It had a name. About an hour later, her radio crackled. They'd found him. He was at a Denny's 11 miles away, eating a burger. Completely unbothered. He told the officers he'd just gone to get food and was planning to come back. He said it calmly, like it was obvious, like the whole thing was a misunderstanding. The officer who called it in said he seemed annoyed to be interrupted during his meal. Officer Reyes drove me to the station herself. She sat with me and bought me a vending machine Sprite, and she said, very gently, "You didn't do anything wrong. You understand that?" And something about the way she said it, like she knew I needed to hear it specifically, made me cry all over again. My parents had to drive 4.5 hours to come pick me up. My father barely spoke the whole drive home. My mother spent most of the ride telling me I had overreacted and made a big scene out of nothing and that my brother was just being playful. Playful. I was 17 years old, alone, in another state, at night with $11. Playful. What I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that this night was going to be the clearest, most honest preview of the next decade of my life. My brother's name is Travis. He is 4 years older than me. Growing up, he was the golden one, the athlete, the charming one, the one who filled every room he walked into with noise and laughter, and the kind of easy confidence that made adults smile and say, "That boy is going somewhere." I was quieter, more studious. I took things seriously when he thought I should lighten up, and I asked questions when he thought I should just go along. He had called me Little Miss Perfect my entire life, like it was an insult, like caring about doing things right was something to be ashamed of. My parents never corrected him, not once. When we got home from Tulsa, there was no conversation, no consequences, no acknowledgement of what he had done. My father sat down in front of the TV. My mother made dinner. Travis went to his room and shut the door. By the next morning, the whole thing was just over, filed somewhere under family awkwardness, never to be spoken of again. I spent the next 2 years of high school just trying to stay small. Don't give anyone a reason. Don't make waves. Graduate and get out. When I got into college, a good school, a scholarship, real distance, my mother cried happy tears at the kitchen table and told me how proud she was. Travis slipped up from his phone and said, "Don't let it go to your head." I left for school 3 months later, and I did not look back. College was the first time I understood what it felt like to be in a room where no one had already decided who I was. My roommate was a girl named Phoebe from Phoenix, loud and funny and relentlessly kind. She laughed at my jokes. She asked my opinion on things. She treated me like a person who had something worth saying, and it was so unfamiliar I didn't know what to do with it for the first few weeks. I studied. I made friends. I got an internship junior year at a communications firm in Chicago that turned into a job offer before I'd even graduated. I called home to share the news. My mother said, "Chicago is so far. Who's going to take care of us?" I moved to Chicago. The years that followed were mine in a way that nothing had ever been before. I built a life from scratch, an apartment I chose myself, decorated myself, paid for myself, a career I was genuinely good at, friends who knew me only as I was now, not as the girl who'd stood on a Walmart curb in Tulsa wondering if anyone was coming back for her. I did maintain contact with my family during those years. I want to be honest about that. I called on birthdays. I went home for some holidays. I kept trying in small, careful doses because I think I still believed or wanted to believe that distance and time had changed things, that maybe we could find some version of a normal relationship. Travis got married in my late 20s. His wife is a woman named Cassidy, pleasant enough, who seems to regard me with polite confusion, like she'd been told one version of me and can't quite reconcile it with the person actually standing in front of her. They had a daughter. My parents absolutely doted on that child. At the wedding reception, Travis gave a toast that was funny and warm and lasted 12 minutes. When the microphone went to me, I was a bridesmaid. I had prepared something. He leaned over and said quietly, "Keep it short. This isn't your moment," in front of everyone. I kept it short. I drove back to Chicago the next morning and I sat in my apartment and I thought about Tulsa, about standing on that curb, about my mother saying I'd probably said something to upset him. I thought, how many times am I going to choose this? I didn't cut contact immediately. It took me another 2 years, a very good therapist named Dr. Whitmore, and a long, honest conversation with Phoebe, who by that point had known me for almost a decade and could say true things to my face without flinching, before I finally made the decision. I stopped calling. I stopped responding to the group family texts. When my mother emailed to ask why she hadn't heard from me, I wrote back a single, clear message. I told her I needed space. I told her why. I told her I wasn't interested in relitigating the past, but I also wasn't willing to keep pretending it hadn't happened. She forwarded the email to Travis. He texted me. "So dramatic. Get over yourself." I blocked his number. That was 11 years ago. 11 years is a long time. Long enough to stop flinching every time you see a car that looks like his. Long enough to stop doing that mental rehearsal before every phone call home. What do I say? What do I avoid? How do I get through this without setting something off? Long enough to forget, most days, that the version of yourself who stood on that Walmart curb with shaking hands ever existed. I was promoted 3 times in 10 years. I led a team. I bought my own place, an actual apartment I own, in a neighborhood I love, with a window in the kitchen that gets morning light and a spare room I've turned into an office. I have people in my life who have shown up for me, consistently, without conditions, for years. I know what it feels like to be loved without an asterisk. Last spring, I was at my desk on a Tuesday afternoon when my phone rang. Unknown number, Illinois area code. I almost didn't answer. I answered. It was Travis. He said my name, and then he said, "Don't hang up," which is never a great sign. I said, "How did you get this number?" He said he'd found it through someone. He didn't specify who. I made a note of that. He said he needed to talk to me. He said things had been hard. He said Cassidy had left him. They'd separated the previous fall, and he was dealing with some financial stuff. And he thought maybe enough time had passed that we could try to. He thought maybe we could. He couldn't finish the sentence. I sat very still in my kitchen with the morning light coming in through the window, and I listened to my brother struggle to articulate what he wanted from me after 11 years of silence. And I waited. I didn't help him find the words. I didn't fill the silence. He finally said, "I thought maybe you could loan me some money, just to get through the next few months. I'm good for it. You know I'm good for it." And there it was. I want to tell you what went through my mind in that moment, because it wasn't anger. I expected anger and it didn't come. What came instead was something much quieter, a kind of clarity, like something that had been slightly out of focus for a very long time had finally, gently resolved. I said, "Travis, I'm going to be honest with you." He said, "Okay." I said, "I don't have anything for you." He started to say something and I said, "I'm not talking about money. I mean, I don't have anything for you. I'm not angry at you. I'm not angry at you. I'm not waiting for an apology. I have built a life that doesn't have you in it, and I'm not interested in reopening that." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're really still holding on to Tulsa? That was 20 years ago. We were kids." I said, "You were 21. I was 17. Another pause. He said, "I just thought family was supposed to mean something." I said, "Yeah, me too." And I ended the call. I sat there for a few minutes after. The morning light was still coming through the kitchen window. My coffee was going cold. Somewhere outside, someone was mowing a lawn. Nothing dramatic happened. No tears, no shaking, no sense of triumph or loss. Just stillness. The specific, settled stillness of a decision you've already made, long before the moment arrived to make it. I did not call him back. I did not reach out to my parents to process what had happened. I put the phone face down on my desk, and I went back to work. My mother called 3 weeks later. She said Travis had told her about the conversation, and she wanted me to know she thought I was being very cold. She said he was struggling. She said he was struggling. She said, "Family forgives." She said, her voice getting quieter the way it always did when she was trying to land something, "I didn't raise you to be like this." I thought about saying a lot of things. I have a whole catalog of things I could have said. Instead, I said, "I hope you're well, Mom." And I said goodbye. She has called 6 more times since then. I've answered twice. The conversations were short and civil and said nothing. I'm telling this story because I spent a long time thinking that what happened in Tulsa was just a bad day, a story I'd get to laugh about, eventually. Can you believe what my brother did? Wild, right? I spent a long time trying to reframe it as a blip, a mistake, something that existed outside the larger pattern instead of being the clearest possible expression of it. The thing about being left somewhere is that it never really just happens once. It happens every time someone tells you you're dramatic for being hurt. It happens every time the person who should protect you decides you're the problem. It happens every time you make yourself smaller to keep the peace, and the peace still doesn't come. I am 34 years old. I live in a city I chose. I have work I'm proud of, and friendships that are real, and a kitchen window that gets light in the morning. I have a therapist I see every other week and a few very good friends who know the whole story and love me anyway. If my brother shows up at my door one day, which I genuinely don't think will happen. But if it did, I won't answer. Not out of bitterness, not out of a need to punish him, just because I already decided a long time ago that I was done waiting in that parking lot, and I'm not going back. People always want the dramatic ending. They want the confrontation, the tearful apology, the moment where everything gets said out loud and the person who hurt you finally understands what they did. I used to want that too. I spent years rehearsing conversations in my head, what I'd say to Travis if I ever got the chance to really say it, what I'd say to my mother, how I'd finally make them understand the weight of what that night in Tulsa actually cost me. But here's what I've learned. Slowly, the hard way, people who leave you stranded don't suddenly develop the capacity to understand why that was wrong just because you find the right words. Travis called me 11 years after I walked out of his life. And his first real ask wasn't an apology. It was a loan. That tells you everything you need to know about what the intervening decade had taught him. Nothing. It had taught him nothing. And that used to make me furious. Now it just makes me tired, and then it makes me grateful. Grateful that I got out when I did, that I built something on the other side of all of it. Because that's the thing about choices. Every single one of them accumulates. Travis made 1,000 small choices over the years to stay exactly who he was, to keep treating the people around him like resources to be used and discarded, to keep moving through the world with that easy assumption that charm was a substitute for character. And those choices built a life that, by his mid-30s, had collapsed in on itself. A marriage gone. Financial instability. Reaching out to a sister he hadn't spoken to in over a decade because there was no one else left to call. I made different choices, not because I was smarter or better, but because that night in Tulsa scared something into me. Standing on that curb at 17 with $11 and no phone, I understood something in my body before I understood it in my head. No one is coming to save you, so you had better learn to save yourself. I took that seriously. I studied hard. I moved to a city where no one had a fixed idea of who I was. I found people like Phoebe who treated me like someone worth knowing. I worked hard enough to earn a life I'm actually proud of. None of that happened because the universe was rewarding me for being good. It happened because I made choices day after day that pointed in the direction of the person I wanted to be. Integrity isn't dramatic. It's just consistency, over time, in the direction of what you actually believe is right. And resilience, real resilience, isn't about bouncing back fast. It's about deciding quietly that the thing that hurt you is not going to be the thing that defines you. It took me years to stop carrying Tulsa like an open wound. It took therapy and distance and a lot of honest conversations with people who loved me. But I did it. Not because I forgave Travis in any meaningful sense, but because I refused to let him live rent-free in my head forever. That would have been his second win. I wasn't giving him that. The calls stopped after that Tuesday afternoon. My mother still reaches out, occasionally. The conversations are short. I'm not cruel, but I'm not available either. Not in the way I used to be. Not in the way that costs me something every single time. Gerald, the Walmart manager who sat across from me in a back office in Tulsa and pushed a box of tissues across the desk. He'll never know how much that 1 hour mattered. He didn't know me anything. He had no reason to stay. But he did, and he made some calls, and he made sure I was okay before he let me leave that office. There are people like that in the world. I've tried to be one of them, in whatever small ways I can. You don't get to choose the family you're born into. But you do get to choose, eventually, what you carry forward and what you set down. I set down Tulsa. I set down the version of myself who kept waiting for people to come back and apologize for leaving. I am not waiting anymore.